Year 1983. Flashdance and Return of the Jedi are box office hits. Michael Jackson performs Billie Jean. The American president is Reagan. Yuri Andropov is the General Secretary of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. Thatcher, Kohl, and Craxi are the leaders of Great Britain, Germany, and Italy. The Soviets are involved in the Afghanistan War. Iran and Iraq are at war since 1980. Last year, British won the Falkland War. The Cold War between the Soviet Union and the West is in full swing. Reagan labels the Soviet Union an evil empire. In March, Reagan proposes the Strategic Defense Initiative, the Star Wars. Tensions increases with the anticipated arrival of Pershing II and Griffin missiles in Europe. The Pershing II is a very accurate ballistic missile and could reach Moscow in 8 minutes. The deployment of the new nuclear weapons worries the Soviet leadership. There are already the first symptoms of weakness of the Soviet communist system. Economic stagnation, unrest in Afghanistan, the rise of Solidarnosc in Poland. If we are weak and they're getting stronger, they will soon attack us, think some of the Soviet leaders. April 4th, 6 U.S. aircraft fly over the Kurile Islands, violating the Soviet airspace. September 1st, the civilian Korean Airlines Flight 007 with 269 passengers enters the Soviet airspace, and it's shot down. Soviets believed it was another American military aircraft. Politburo suspect that the civilian airplane was deliberately sent over Soviet air defenses in order to create a scandal. October 5th, the Solidarnosc leader Lech Walesa wins the Nobel Peace Prize, another provocation. October 25th, U.S. forces invade Grenada and overthrow the communist government. September 1983, NATO announces that, in November, there will be Able Archer 83, a very realistic military exercitation dangerously close to Soviet borders, that will simulate a Warsaw Pact invasion and a nuclear attack. Some members of the Politburo and the KGB chairman, Viktor Ebrikov, suspect that Able Archer 83 is a cover for a surprise Western nuclear attack. The Kremlin asks again to cancel Able Archer exercise and to stop the deployment of the missiles in Europe, too close to their border. During the Cuban Missile Crisis, the United States was within hours of starting a war, for the exact same reasons. November 2nd, while all U.S. foreign military bases are in alert, officially because of 2 truck bombs in Beirut, who killed 300 Western soldiers, Able Archer 83 exercise starts. The Warsaw Pact begins the mobilization. All the aviation units are on alert. ICBMs are prepared for a possible launch. Spetnatz, the special units, cross the borders of Western countries, disguised as tourists. November 8th, Kremlin learned that, early in the morning of November 12th, during Able Archer exercise, the Western leaders Reagan, Thatcher, and Kohl will be relocated to secret shelters. This move confirms Soviet fears. The war could start very soon. November 9th, 8 a.m., extraordinary meeting in the Kremlin, with all the members of the Politburo. Andropov insists to take action immediately, with a nuclear preemptive attack. But Ustinov, the defense minister, note that the American retaliation to a nuclear attack will kill more than 50 million Russian people. The NATO attack could be prevented with a conventional invasion of Europe. Warsaw Pact armies could reach the River Rhine in 7 days, disrupting the enemy nuclear preparations. The Soviet Category A units in Eastern Europe are maintained at full combat readiness at all times. They could attack within just a few hours. Mikhail Gorbachev thinks that it's better to use diplomatic channels before any military attack. But the majority of the war cabinet fear that this could uncover Soviet plans and anticipate the American nuclear strike. Gromyko, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, thinks that a NATO attack is improbable, but USA are highly aggressive, and they will attack, soon, or later, so, better to attack first. The decision is taken. It will be war. Marshal Sergei Akhromayev, Chief of the General Staff of the Armed Forces, has the order to invade Europe. November 9, 13 a.m. All the Warsaw Pact's units are on the move. Air assault brigades are taken by AN-22 Antonov and civil aeroflot planes. WW3 submarines, armed with SSN-8 ballistic missiles, sneak under the ice cap of the Arctic, getting closer to Canadian coasts. Warsaw Pact tank units move to the German border. USA satellites detect the extensive Warsaw Pact preparations, and NATO begins to react. But NATO command believes it's only a demonstrative action, not a real attack. They are wrong. November 11, 3 a.m. Spetnatz commandos sabotage electric power plants in Germany. At 5 o'clock, thousands of missiles and artillery shells are launched against NATO forward defenses in Germany. Warsaw Pact bombers, Tupolev Tu-95 Bear and Tu-22M backfire, launch bombs and air-to-surface missiles against the NATO air and naval bases in Europe and Alaska. The Tu-95 can drop 11 tons of load over a target. Anti-aircraft missiles and NATO fighters, F-15, F-16, cause huge losses to Soviet bombers. But the effects of this attack is devastating. Command centers, deposits, barracks, are hit. Almost all German airports are damaged. Then, at dawn, the Warsaw Pact armies cross the border into West Germany. The Third World War starts. Berlin, first day of war. The 4th and the 11th DDR Volksarmee divisions easily suppress the NATO defenses. In the Western Pacific, the Kitty Hawk carrier is damaged by 4 SSN-19 missiles. After many attempts to save the ship, the crew has to abandon it. Anti-ship missiles rarely sink major warships, but they start fires. Is the fire that ultimately kills large ships. The Soviet 7th Air Assault Division is airdropped behind the NATO lines in Denmark. November 11th, Polish and East German Marine units land in the Danish Islands. The Soviet 106th Air Assault Division takes the strategic bridge of Domitz on the River Elbe. The Soviet 20th Guards Army engages the German 1st Corps near Wolfsburg. The Soviet Second Army, with the support of the Polish First and Second Army, advances through the Elbe River. The Germans and the Danish Corps are outnumbered and retreat. The NATO reaction is weak on all fronts. The surprise attack caught NATO completely off guard. In central Germany, the Soviet 8th Guards Army turn on the Fulda Gap, slowed by the resistance of the US 5th Corps, reinforced with the 8th U.S. Infantry Division. In southern Germany, the Soviet 1st Guard Tank Army, and 3 armored and 5 motor rifle divisions of the Czechoslovak People's Army, overcomes the defenses of the U.S. 7th Corps, and forces the German 2nd Corps to retreat. November 11th, British Northwood Headquarters, midnight. The Naval Command asks the authorization for launch of nuclear Polaris missiles on Moscow. Margaret Thatcher deny the permission. Actually, no nukes are hitting Britain. Reagan too authorizes only the use of conventional weapons for the moment. November 11th, 1 p.m. Second wave of bombings. Su-24 fencers drop bombs on all the targets, not enough damaged. In Germany, Italy, Alaska, Great Britain. The strike is successful, but, again, with huge losses. The Warsaw Pact main thrust come across the North German plain, the only area that favor the attacker. November 12th, second day of war. East Germany's army, the best of the non-Soviet Warsaw Pact forces, with 2 armoured and 4 mechanized divisions, attacks frontally the 3 armoured divisions of the British Army of the Rhine. The British retreat to another defensive prepared position. Their mission is to slow down Warsaw Pact Army, waiting for reinforcements. But the other NATO units, taken by surprise, remain in their positions. This leaves holes in the front line. November 14th, the Soviet Third Shock Army, with its T-64 tanks, run in, and disintegrates any defense. German First Army, the Dutch, and the Belgians, risk to be encircled, and quickly retreat. The American 5th Corps, one of the best equipped in NATO, responsible to hold the line on the Fulda Gap, has exposed flanks. They are forced to leave their positions, and start a fighting retreat towards Frankfurt. The half-century of paranoia about the Russians surging through the Fulda Gap, the trillions of dollars spent on defense, were pointless. The Fulda Gap was the new Maginot Line. November 15th, Denmark falls. November 18th, the 20th, the 2nd, and 4 divisions of the 3rd Soviet Army, overcomes what remains of the German First Corps, and occupy Hamburg, and Hanover. They are stopped along the Weser River by the German 3rd Corps, the Belgian 1st, and by the British 4th Armoured Division, reinforced by fresh troops from UK. In the south, the Warsaw Pact forces halt the advance in front of Munich when they runs out of fuel and ammunitions. Norwegian Front, November 11th, 8 a.m. The Soviet Northern Fleet Marine Brigade land in the northern Norwegian Islands, using ordinary warships and merchant vessels. The 69th and the 77th Soviet Rifle Divisions attack frontally Kirkenes. The Soviet 76th Air Assault Division lands at Tromso, held by 3 brigades of the Norwegian Northern Army. Soviets are stopped by the heavily fortified coastal defenses. November 11th, Bulgarians invade European Turkey. The 3rd and 2nd Armies breaks the lines held by the Turkish First Corps. Then, they advance quickly, along the highway, for Istanbul. The Turkish retreats behind the Çatalya line. In Caucasus, the Soviets keep a defensive posture. High mountains, bad season, and in this front, Soviets have no first-line units. There is a string of local battles, which bring basically no results. France is not NATO member, and it's excluded by the Soviet attack. Yuli Vorontsov, the Soviet ambassador in Paris, ensure the French that they don't plan on going any further than the Rhine. French President François Mitterrand opts for a partial conflict. France enters the war, but French army and French nukes will be used only for the defense of national boundaries. From the Italian bases, NATO launches airstrikes against the advancing Warsaw Pact Army in Germany, repeatedly crossing the Austrian airspace and violating Austrian neutrality. November 15th, after a short ultimatum, the Soviet Southern Army Group and the Hungarian Army with 1,000 tons 54 and T-55 tanks invade Austria. Taken by surprise, the little Austrian army is overcome in 4 days. Their standing army is only a division, and mobilizing mechanized reserve forces takes time. Wien is indefensible, it's immediately turned into a free city, and falls. But the retreating Austrian troops destroy the Alpine tunnels and bridges, giving the Italian army enough time to bring in reinforcements. Giulia and Tridentina Italian Alpine Brigades, and the Ariete Armored Division. The Soviets are halted along the Alps. Over Germany, in the first week, Soviets has the air supremacy. NATO air power is technologically superior to Warsaw Pact, but they have low numbers, and suffered heavy losses during the first hours of the surprise attack. The Warsaw Pact bombers hit railways nodes, bridges, and harbors in Germany, Italy, Norway, and Turkey. Air raids against more distant targets in UK, Spain, Greenland, and Alaska mostly fails. The USA soil is untouched, but it's difficult to bomb the Soviet soil too. The Soviets have the most massive air defenses in the world, with about 7,000 radars, and an extensive variety of missile weapon systems. The S-300 SAM is already operational. NATO F-111, Harriers, A-10, F-4 Phantoms, F-16, and Tornadoes spend the first week of war just trying to knock out SAM sites and mobile radars, while fighting hordes of Soviet interceptors. The main dogfights are F-15 on one side and MiG-25 on the other. The best fighters of 1983 are probably the F-16 and the MiG-29. But there are less than 50 MiG-29 in service. The B-52 are useless over East Europe, with all Warsaw Pact radars and air defenses still functional. They are limited to deep penetrations over less defended airspace in Siberia. Only the stealth F-117, based in Britain and in Keflavik, in Iceland, are effective. But there are only 18 F-117, and they are too slow to reach targets deep in Russia. At sea, the NATO naval forces dominate everywhere. 2/3 of the Soviet vessels are lost in the first 4 days. 3 of the 4 Kiev-class aircraft carriers, 2 of the 4 Kirov-class battlecruiser, are sunk almost immediately. The U.S. carriers are at present located here. Soviet Navy main task is to sever the naval supply lines from North America to Europe. The Soviets aren't concerned with the number of USA infantry being flown over. They need to prevent tanks and other equipment from coming across. Most of the Soviet attack submarines are concentrated in defensive missions. Only 3 Charlie-class submarines and few Alpha and Victor-class attack submarines enter in North Atlantic. They have some success. November 23, a convoy is attacked with a salvo of 8 SSN-9 Siren missiles, launched by Charlie K-458, at a 80 km range. 2 merchant ships are sunk, one of them full of new M1 Abram tanks. Another Charlie, in the Caribbean Sea, hit a tanker which have just crossed the Panama Canal, and is not yet protected by a convoy. The targeting information are provided by satellites. The few sinkings don't come remotely close to halting U.S. resupply convoys to Europe. The Soviet submarines only slow the flow supplies. NATO is forced to form convoys, escort them with anti-submarine units, and cover them with aircraft based on the Coral Sea and Midway carriers. This takes time. They have little work to do. But Soviet submarines are still there, armed, and dangerous. In the first week of war, in Europe, the Warsaw Pact is advancing in all the fronts. Other Soviet divisions, from Urals and Moscow districts, are flowing in Central Europe. NATO reinforcements are arriving from USA, to feed the gigantic battle for Europe. But the war will soon spread all over the world. This is only the start.